Why, as the Watford Museum curator and the Watford Borough Council heritage manager, why is keeping our local community heritage and history alive and well? Why is that so important in these days? I mean, after all, there's just a bunch of old stuff.
Oh, well, we're all a bunch of old stuff in our own way, aren't we? No, it's so important, and you know that, Martin. It's just wonderful, because it's the connection. You can go into world museums and you see these incredibly beautiful items, but they've not got the personal connection. They've not got those personal stories. And for me, there's nothing as amazing as when you're talking to someone who was there, or remember, or it means something to them, or it's their family, or though that sort of like really places you in the heart of your community, and you learn so much because you've got this constant resource of really kind, amazing people sharing their memories, items coming in. There's always something to uncover. It's absolutely incredible, isn't it?
Yeah, no, it is. And that's what I found. It's those personal stories and everything, which I'm really now, working a lot on, trying to get those stories out there. There's so many of them that need to be told. And it's just, something you get into when you happen to be, interested in history and heritage. How does it, the local community, I mean, the history of the local community, say Watford, for example, how does that relate to the younger people? How do you, how does it help them find a connection to where their parents, grandparents grew up?
I think that's one of the wonderful things about local history, is that it has got a hook for everyone. So for some people, it might be through the football, it might be through the team they support. For other people, it might be being able to share stories of how their family have come to Watford and their journeys. And actually, that's something really amazing for younger generations when they discover exactly what their family went through, how amazingly brave and courageous they were to travel across the world, make a new start, and all the contributions people make. And I love that, because Watford's one of those towns, 20 miles outside of London, people travel to it and they stay and they make something brilliant. I mean, you're an example of that, Martin.
Funny enough, I was just thinking of the same thing. You're talking about travel and
Yeah.
relocating. My parents traveled to Canada and then to, northern Minnesota in the States, and everything, packed up everything, left London, and then we ended up back here. But one of the interesting stories that you've just come across or is the Afro-Caribbean people who moved here from Mauritius and Jamaica and different places, and how they're finding, the children of those people are finding the history and heritage of Watford and where their family grew up. Do you find that a lot? Are you getting kind of multicultural connection?
Yeah, which is wonderful, because Watford is a really diverse town, and that's one of the amazing things about it, because people that move to Watford, they make it their own and they contribute. I mean, you see at the moment, the chair of the council is Polish in origin, and she's so Watford, but she brings that incredible heritage and culture with her, and it all adds. Nothing kind of gets taken away in Watford. I think it's a beautiful, it's not always perfect, but there's so much kind of cultural contribution from that. But actually, I mean, the diverse history of Watford, the Black history goes back 300 years, which is, which surprises most people. And I think it helps anchor people to know that they're part of something, and that their story is part of the Watford story. It's not like a little add-on or a little, that's a kind of a little diversity section or something like that, that they're so integrated and so important. And that comes through in all different collections, in Cassabury, football, social history, local shops and trade. The contributions that people have made over the years are absolutely amazing. So sometimes, we're talking about generations and generations and generations now, which is fantastic.
Really? Do you find that there is a bigger connection with, are people more interested in the background and the history and heritage of where they live, like Watford? Are you finding an increase in that? Are more people now more interested in it than, say, when you started?
People,
hang on one sec. It's just, as luck would have it, somebody's just showed up here.
We all sorted?
Yeah, I've just got to little surprise from the United States government. So
Oh, I hope it's a good surprise.
yeah, it is. Funny enough, they still keep sending me economic development checks. So
Oh, wow. That's good news.
I've been over here since 2006, and the second check has just arrived. So now I got to figure out, how do I
Oh,
cash an American check, you know? So, but
wow.
yeah, I heard a rumor it was coming, and it's just arrived. So that's my second one. So there's my holiday
Oh,
plan.
fantastic. I like posts like that.
Yeah, I know. I was a bit surprised. I thought it was just the neighbor stopping by, but
Oh,
yeah. So yeah, I definitely got to see if I can bank these. Um, okay, let's see. Yeah, intergenerational connections with the history of Watford. Um, are we reaching a lot of generations? Are more generations, are they more interested now in their local history?
I think there's always something to connect people, isn't there? And sometimes it's stories. And that's one of the wonderful things as well. You know, actually, you might not think you're interested in local history, but then when you actually delve down into it and you hear about ghost stories, or that Watford was once famous for body snatching, or infamous, I should say, or you start going into your own history, or there's something that really connects with everyone, and it's just sometimes finding it and getting that out there. So it's not perfect, and you know, we're always trying to share that story and take it on and encourage more people into the museum. That's one of the things that we miss actually about being able to do events and activities, because quite often they do attract a younger audience as well, and a lot of families. But certainly we found from lockdown that there's people who've started delving, you know, who are looking online more than they've ever done before, because they've got more time or they're thinking differently. A lot of people have actually upskilled in terms of, you know, research. So we're finding lots of people coming through to us that way. But because we do so much on social media as well, you know, we try and keep sharing stories, and that's really fun to do, and find different angles
Yeah.
and fun things, you
You,
know,
you've
because
got quite a
really fun.
connection with the Watford Observer. So there's always,
Yeah,
you're working with them to do some of their nostalgia and putting things out there, which is great too. So
that's been really fun. And the idea of thinking about what defines Watford in 50 objects is quite a challenge, you know, and trying to remember so many different angles of things. And there's lots of different things that appeal. And there's some really obvious star objects in the collection,
yeah.
like Charlie the revolving chimp, who always makes people smile. Or for Watford fans, it might be the Watford Reserve clock. Other people, Elton John's stage costume, and other people, it's printing presses, you know, that we have such an amazing printing history, or a beer bottle, you know. That what I love is that there's such a broad range of things
Yeah.
that everyone connects with something different, and I love that you can never assume what's going to really grab someone as well, which is wonderful. But yeah, that's been really good fun, and it's great to try and to reach more people
Yeah.
and keep thinking of new ways to do that.
What are some of your personal favorite items that you have at the Watford Museum?
Oh wow. You know, as a curator, I should always be ready for that question, shouldn't I? um, there's just so many, because there's so many stories. It's what I love is those amazing stories behind things. Like, we have a collection of saris that were donated to the museum, and they belong to a lady. It was her daughter who donated them. And when she went to work in the 1960s, no one else in her office wore a sari, and she, you know, she was doing something quite trailblazing, and you know, her saris are stunning, and they her daughter offered us the dress saris, but we said, well, we'd love her day to day, you know, what she wore when she was working in Watford. And they're really lovely because it's the people behind it, and you see the photos. We have an album that was recently acquired by the museum, which is of a local boxer, and he was part of the Boxing Buxtons, and his family were one of the first black families in Watford, and there's this amazing story behind it. So there's things like that, but there's some sparkly, glittery things as well. Like, we have coronets that were donated by the Earl of Essex, and they're like mini crowns. They're gorgeous, you know, all kind of velvet and ermine, and there's robes that go with them that were used for coronations. So to have something that glamorous in the museum collection. And the art, you know, wonderful pieces of art that were painted by local artists, right the way through to work by Turner, Epstein, Reynolds, you know, this incredible art collection. So and of course, for me as a football fan, I absolutely love the football collections. But sometimes it's really tiny things, like something small, like a photograph. Yeah, there's just so many lovely things that come in, and it's like having your birthday working in a museum, isn't it? Where you're just like, oh wow, these things turn up and just light up your day, and then you can share them, and then the stories that come out of that, and people share more. It just all keeps snowballing, which is amazing.
Yeah, I have found that one of the things I enjoy the most is when I do get a call from somebody saying that they've just gone up to the loft and found a package from grandma and grandpa or uncle so-and-so, and he used to work at the hospital, and there's a bunch of stuff in here. Would you like it? Well, to me, that's like Christmas, you know, every time I get that call. And you don't know what you're going to find when these people show up with a, you know, M&S plastic bag full of, you know, whatever. And then you open it up and you go, you know, oh my God, I've just opened up King Tut's tomb, you know, with some really rare, you know, never before seen documents or photographs or something from the hospital. It's just absolutely amazing. I just find that just really exciting. I'm pretty much convinced I'll travel almost anywhere to collect whatever somebody wants to donate. So I'm
Oh,
just
no,
very
it's
excited to
wonderful,
see what
isn't
it
it?
is and that, you know, and some of them are quite rare and they haven't, since the hospital closed in 1995, a lot of this stuff, which you're very much aware of with the war memorial, a lot of this was gone in 1995 and hasn't been seen again until you and Olivia have gone through and found a bunch of stuff and then brought it out to the light. And we've been able to put it in the Hive Heritage Center, thanks to the council, you know, doing that with us. So yeah, it's pretty amazing when you find things like that. So where do you see the future going as far as, are we going to be an online museum? Are we going to be doing more virtual things? And even after maybe the pandemic is over with,
Yeah.
whenever that might be, but you know, when it's over with, are we going to be a virtual society? Are we going to be doing museum tours online?
I think there'll be a part of it should be that. And, you know, the internet has got its downsides and its pluses. And I think actually, in terms of being able to connect people, the fact that we can be in the middle of a lockdown and have a really lovely conversation and connect and stay in contact. The number of people that have found us because we're online or they've seen a story online and they've shared something. I actually shared on my own Facebook about your new book, and a friend of mine who lives in Pittsburgh now was saying, oh, my mum worked there, and she said she will check if they've got any family memories, but she's going to buy the book. But it's that sort of thing that you don't get without that virtual connection, and I love that. But at the same time, what makes museums and heritage centres and what we do is the real thing. And there's nothing beats being able to see that object, connect with it, smell it sometimes, and to keep it safe. And they'll always, I think it's so important that people don't forget that side of things, that, you know, we're collecting this for a reason. We're you know, the caretakers for this incredible history, and we're so honoured to have that job. But it isn't just a case of taking a photograph of it and you know, leaving it in a cupboard or anything like that. People love that about museums. It's in being immersed in it and being able to see it and share it and enjoy it for yourself.
Yeah, no, that's definitely true. So I have found out that social media and everything, it is great, and it's not the ideal way to do it. But I have noticed with just my group, you know, Leavesden Hospital History Association, we have now been able to reach a lot more people because we are online. We do have a website. I am posting more things on YouTube. Doing more videos. I just recently got a call from somebody who lives in New Zealand, used to work at the hospital, has some great memories, wanted a copy of the book. Now we have a connection in Pittsburgh, which is amazing.
Yeah.
Somebody in Pittsburgh, I think that's great. That's probably one of the few people in the States that are connected. A lot of people from Canada. So I guess social media and doing things virtually will help us reach a bigger audience for those that obviously aren't going to travel here from New Zealand or Australia to visit the museum. But, you know, if they can do it that way, you know, that's pretty good. What's in store for the Watford Museum? Just recently read an interesting article in the Watford Observer. Are we looking to expand, Sarah? What's going on?
Oh, well, it's it is exciting. That's the first thing is, for me, you know, museums, it's been really challenging times for everything in the cultural sector, and for so many businesses, for so many people, personally, professionally, economically. There's, you know, it's, last year was incredibly tough. So for us to have that commitment from Watford Council, to have so much support, you know, to have a mayor who's championing us, and the councillors, and, you know, to be part of a Watford Council team who really, you know, go that extra mile to support us. They're all huge things to have. So for us, there's a part of what's going on is that they're reviewing the service, which is great. So looking at exactly the kind of things you say, like, you know, about the online presence, what do we do, what are people interested in, and making sure that we actually put, as you know, go forward with the strongest sort of opportunities that we have. There are ideas about, you know, could we possibly move, what do we, you know, that they're all being investigated. So there isn't, you know, I can't tell you because I don't know. There isn't like a, this is definitely going to happen, or something like that. But, you know, it's going to have to be part of a bigger picture anyway, you know, because the museum is part of a big jigsaw of other cultural things going on in Watford, and, you know, things have to be financially viable as well, you know, to make sure that the museum doesn't just end up with something glossy and new, but has something that's sustainable and can grow and can work in the right ways. And, you know, this is, you know, being funded by taxpayers and the community and things, so, you know, it has to be right. So it's a process rather than it being, this is what's going to happen. But what I'm excited about is all of this work is being done, and we're getting lots of support on that. And then hopefully there'll be quite soon, you know, a plan going forward saying, yeah, this is what the council wants to be doing in the next 5-10 years. And it can take a long time for museums, but what's great is to be moving and to have that support, you know, that we feel really grateful for that, and really, really excited.
Ideally, like most museums, you know, even I've run into it with our small little heritage center at Leaps and Country Park, you know, space is the thing. The Benskins office building that you're in now has been around how long? That building in itself is part of Watford history.
It is. It dates to 1775 and opened as a museum in 1981. So there's actually quite a lot of challenges with the building. So that's one of the things that we're looking into, you know, storage space, displays, accessibility, you know, because actually some of your most beautiful old buildings can sometimes be the most challenging ones for visitors to enjoy. And, you know, a museum in the 21st century, that's got to be really important to us. You know, if we say we're a community museum, we need to be able to be accessible to all. So that's something that's really important to look at. And it's a lovely iconic building. I mean, there's no talk, you know, it's listed, there's no kind of that will get knocked down or anything like that. But it's had very different uses over its history. So maybe, you know, if they do decide about moving the museum to a different location, it would have another chapter in its, you know, in the building's history, which is actually fabulous. You know, but I love that. I do love that building. So
I've always been a big fan of that building, just as a building. You know, it's a really iconic kind of, you know, 1700s, you know, older office building kind of setup, you know. So.
Yeah, and the fact it was originally a family home, then it was the offices for Benskins, then became the museum. So yeah, there's so much opportunity, but that's, you know, it's bigger than just, you know, what I would like or whatever. But I'm just excited to be part of it, and that we have got so much going on and so much passion for Watford's heritage. You know, that isn't the same in all places, and we're lucky in the area we are that we've got such sort of, you know, interest and support, I think.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, you can see it with everybody that's involved in history and heritage in Watford. You know, they are very supportive of it, and they do recognize the importance of having that kind of thing around. So I think there's a pretty good chance, in my own humble opinion, I think there's a pretty good chance that you'll end up in a new building somewhere. So, but what do you think? what are your concerns for just history and heritage and museums and the whole idea of retaining a community's history and heritage? What are your concerns in these days? You know, obviously a lot of people, a lot of government agencies aren't funding the arts, or they aren't funding history. Are you concerned about anything in particular? Just generally, not about Watford, but
Yeah,
as a curator, as a museum manager, what are you worried about with the whole history and heritage thing?
I think there are big concerns. I think economically that is a huge concern. You know, museums have been shutting, and some won't ever reopen, which is desperately sad. And there's also the challenges of, you know, museums tend to sort of, you know, be quite tight on the funding, and then as things get tighter, and you know, it's fair enough. You know, if people say, well, what would you rather have, bins collected or a museum? You know, so that's why that support, you know, and it's great having funding bodies like the lottery, but they tend to fund projects.
Yeah.
You know, they're not revenue. They don't fund a museum to just exist.
Yeah.
And so there, you know, there's a lot of challenges out there. In some museums, you know, we've got small teams, so actually fundraising, you know, people say, oh, why don't you do this or don't you do that, and it takes a lot of time.
Yeah.
And a lot of effort. So I think, you know, this is a huge challenge across the sector. And I think there's other challenges. You know, I mean, things have been coming out, like last year there were quite a lot of questions about colonialism in museums, and I do think museums have got a long way to go. So not everything is to do with finances and lockdown. I think sometimes in the past, well, certainly some museums have seen themselves as like the intellectual kind of gatekeepers for history, and that can be a bit of a shame sometimes. You know, if you're not really valuing, I mean, I think where we come from is we're working right at the sort of like the coalface, aren't we? So for us, the people we work with, the community, are our absolute legends. They're our stars. Whereas sometimes people kind of forget that, and if they haven't got that connection, I think people sometimes there isn't always that understanding within the museum sector, and that is changing. But you know, it's again, you know, what about young people coming through where there's not jobs for people? How do people get to be part of an industry? How do people from different backgrounds get to be part of an industry as well? So all of these different challenges, you know, there's always lots of different questions in museums, from do you collect human remains right the way through to, you know, who are we here for? What's our purpose?
Yeah.
And yeah, so for me, taking that down to a local level, it's always about remembering why we're here and what we're here for. And it's not to be, you know, to sort of like promote ourselves. It's, you know, when I do things like this, it's lovely seeing people I know and chatting to them, but it's all about the museum and the connection. And
Yeah.
that's, you know, and I'm part of this amazing team, and you know, Olivia, but the rest of the team are just fabulous. It's such a lovely team effort.
Are you trying to get more of your, as happened with the collection that you found from the old Leavesden Asylum, Leavesden Hospital? You've been given a lot of stuff over time. Are you looking for more opportunities to get that more out into the public, not just so much on display with you, but returning it to where it originally came from, if that opportunity? Are you looking to get that stuff out of the basement, off the shelves, and out somewhere where it can be seen?
Sometimes that happens. I mean, sometimes we do things like, for example, Sun Engraving. There was a mosaic that we looked after till it was able to be reincorporated into a new build. So we aren't always the best place for things to end up in the long term. But in terms of getting things out there, and people sometimes say, well, why don't you put things, you know, out here or there? I mean, I went somewhere and there was a hotel, and it actually had a museum had rented out its art collection, but it meant that you had to be, you know, you had to be a resident of the hotel to see it. But for us, we do have to be careful. I mean, things that we're sharing with you is because, you know, you're a proper organised, sort of, you know, reputable venue, and you're caring for things. You're working to a a high standard. So you can't lend out things as easily as you think. We do have loans boxes and things like that, and we do exhibitions, but in terms of how you do it, it takes a lot of work actually to get things out in the right place carefully and safely, because objects get damaged very easily, from it being mishandling to light to other environmental conditions. So sometimes we are working about, have we got something that was donated because there wasn't a Three Rivers museum or a Bushy museum or the Hive at least, and are there things that should be going somewhere that's more appropriate? So that's part of our ongoing work with the collections as well, to review things. And it's not about getting rid of things, it's about saying, right, we've got this, is it the right home? Are we the best guardians for it? And sometimes getting things to the right people so that it become part of a wider context and a bigger story is exciting. Like working with you is amazing, because these things come out and they're shared, and the stories blossom, and the friendships as well.
Yeah, it's that connection with other people that are interested in this. And I still hope that sometime in the future, a lot of us, history people from like my organization, Watford Museum, Bushy Museum, Three Rivers Museum, and a few others in the area, I do hope that we're going to be able to get together and just, really do some networking and find out what everybody's doing to help preserve the history and heritage of their own area. I shamefully have to admit, I've never been to the Bushy Museum or South Oxley. I'm always at the Rickey Museum when we can get there, but the other places I just haven't made it to. So it'd be great to hook up and everything, just to see what we can do to keep promoting it. What, just out of curiosity, what's the oldest item from Watford's history that you have in the museum?
Well, actually, in terms of excuse me, of absolute age, it's going to be a fossil that we have. We have a large ammonite fossil that was found in Watford. We haven't got very much natural history actually in Watford, in terms of within the collections. So that's quite a rare piece. In terms of man-made items, our archaeological collection goes back to the Stone Age, mainly of people travelling through. But one actually of our star objects is our Bronze Age bowl that was part of a scrap hoard, and it was found about where Morrison's car park is now in West Watford, and that was uncovered in 1959, and it's got some lovely axe heads, swords, some sort of like decorative items in it, but what is particularly amazing is this rather scrunched up metal bowl, and when it was first discovered, then the museum assessed it didn't think it was Bronze Age because it didn't match things from the Bronze Age, that it had rivets, and some of the sort of decoration didn't fit. And that's true, but it turns out it's because it's actually a Phoenician Bronze Age bowl. So, to have something that amazing, and there is nothing quite like it in the rest of the country. There's nothing that of that age that's come from that background that was here for, from the Bronze Age. There's lots of lovely things you can see, Phoenician items in the British Museum, but not ones that were found in the ground in sort of like, Watford. So for me, it's not exactly the oldest object, but to have that incredible history and length of things. So our archaeological collection is quite small, but some of the items are absolute gems in it.
I think that's just great. Yeah. You can say you have this Phoenician Bronze Age bowl that was found under Morrison's car park in Watford. Exactly. It's like, again, what was going on there 400, 500, 600 years ago or whatever, amazing.
Well, that's it as well, because then people know that locality, and it has that connection. It makes you smile, doesn't it? And then you think, wow, there's so much more than you know about, and we're always learning. And the bowl has caused a huge amount of archaeological interest across Europe. So it's actually been to Germany, and a replica's been made of how it would look. It's had research going on from archaeologists from Britain, Spanish, German, Italian archaeologists, which is incredible,
Wow.
And all this research is going on because it is such a rare piece. And that's what's so lovely about local history as well, is we have people that come to get in contact with us from all over the world, because Watford's history does connect up. Like Cassabury, for example, is always a really popular subject, and we have curators and archivists that come over, and conservators that come over from American museums to see us, to research with us, and I always offer I'm happy to travel, but they always seem to come to me. But never mind. But that's amazing. When you get the Met coming to see you, to get your local knowledge, and that's amazing for us. That our local history is represented in most of the world museums. That's very exciting.
That's very interesting. That just a piece that was found in Watford has become such an internationally a piece of archaeology or of interest to a lot of other people. And, just in our little town of Watford, we're now getting, a lot of interest in what we're collecting here and that. Speaking of collections and that, how do you maintain, or what process do you go through? What's your maintenance regime if you get a unique piece? What do you have to do to repair it, fix it, maintain it, so it is, do you have to do a lot of repairs? Do you just put them out as they are? Or? We
don't tend to, because it's part of an item's history. Every item that comes in is unique anyway. So there's everything. Well, not everything, but there's certain groupings within collections. So in terms of, you have paper items or fine art, sculpture, costume, they all have different kind of care needs, and that's actually something we're working on at the moment, a collections review, so that we can better look after what we've got, and I think that's so important. So but you get things in, and they've got history on them, and sometimes people will want to clean things up, but then you lose that history, and you lose that item's story. And a shiny something isn't necessarily, it just looks like you've made it. So and it doesn't look real, almost, because you've lost that. So again, with art, we've got an amazing art collection. Some of it looks quite dark because over the years, the varnish and the layers of dirt, but that actually protects the paintings as well from harm. So long term, yes, you could look to do some conservation work, but we mainly do conservation rather than restoration work. Okay. Yeah. So there's a difference, and different places have different ways of doing it. But I think, for museums, most of the time we take things in as they are, and if something's got a crack in it, it doesn't matter, because it's part of its story. Whereas if you've got your own antique collection, an item with a crack is nothing to you, whereas to us it's not lost any of its historic value.
Yeah.
And I think that's exciting as well, is that it sometimes things have got that the knocks and the bumps, and that's part of the story.
We ran into that when we were doing the cemetery restoration after we did the archaeological survey of East Lane Cemetery. We had some very old stones, and some of the newer ones from the 60s were cleaned, but we decided not to really clean up any of the older ones back from the 1920s and 1930s, because they kind of, to us, would have lost a lot of their history. Yeah, you can't read all the words and everything, but it's old just by looking at it. And we didn't want to make it too new. We didn't want things to appear too new, because this is a site that goes back to 1905. So we kind of wanted to, keep some of that. So,
and it's a site that's evolving, and that the aging is part of the process. And sometimes we've been involved in projects like St Mary's Churchyard, where we did help with a project that restored tombs, because basically they were breaking and they were disintegrating, and at that stage things were going to be lost. So that was about helping to give things to keep things going, and that was an exciting project to be involved in, because that really was a restoration project of things that had become crumbled and broken pieces, and seeing them actually become tombs again. And they'd had railings around them, and it was all really horrible, and then you've just got this beautiful area again now, and showing due respect to people from the past. But again, it's not about making something look new, it's about respecting the age on things. And sometimes, restoration work that's been undertaken in the past has now been proved to have been quite negative. If people over clean something, sometimes we're asked, like, well, why don't you clean silver trophies and things like that? But if we're there polishing everything over time, that you're wearing it down, and it looks pretty, but it isn't. You're losing the inscriptions or whatever. So it's always an ongoing thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
And we're always learning, and we're part of a profession, and that professional development and being part of that and keeping your learning going and up to date is really important.
Yeah, there was an inquiry on some of the Facebook pages and everything. Apparently, there are some bricks that are in one of the older buildings from the Watford orphanage, or that have the workhouse. Yeah, the workhouse where the former residents of the workhouse has engraved their names and things in the bricks. And as some people were querying what's going to happen to those, are we going to be able to save them? Could you really relocate those bricks, or how do you make sure that they're going to be around for more generations? Are you aware of that one? Because I thought,
yes, that was actually one of my items in the Watford Observer. That's been amazing. The first time I was shown those was, it just blew me away, because it's so poignant, and very sad, really, because they were engraved to remember workhouse inmates who passed away, and they're actually the only memorial, that exists. Those people didn't have a gravestone, so that brick is like their gravestone, and there's so much history there. And they're at the moment they're within part of the Watford General site, and so you can go and see them. They're actually on a is it within a courtyard, but it's a wall that you can go and see. And I'm always happy if people want to contact me, I can give you directions on how to see them. But what's lovely at the moment is they are in situ, and if things can stay where they are, far better that they're on the wall there than in a museum where they've lost that location and that context. But it is a watching brief on that. That's a listed building, but they are, they do need some work. So we're working with the West Watford History Group, and also the planning department at Watford Council. So we're coming together and seeing what we can do, because actually a lot of this comes under our planning team as well, they were the ones who we did the St Mary's Churchyard project with. They were the ones who did the Frogmore House project that's now seen that building entirely renovated and back in use, which is amazing. So, behind the scenes, our planning department are absolute legends for local history, and people just don't necessarily know about it. They always assume the worst with planning departments, but they work incredibly hard. But it's something, as long as the building stands, the bricks should be there. But, we are looking at, what needs to be done to kind of keep them safe, where they are at the moment.
What do you think? What do you think museums? I mean, outside of the virtual idea of a museum, but what kind of items are being collected or will be? What items from now will be put in a museum 100 years from now, so people go, oh, I'm glad that's in a museum. What kind of things do you think we're going to be collecting and curating, in the next 100 years?
It's always changing, isn't it? And what means something to us now, it's amazing. We have loans boxes that go out to schools, and you see how items that were even a normal thing when I was a kid, a telephone, actually, where you dial, that throws people. They've had that as an interactive in some museums where you pick up the phone and you have to dial, and people needed instructions because they were like, what? They were poking the holes and things like, well, what do I do? Because they didn't know how to use a dialing telephone. So sometimes there's surprises and you won't know. I mean, if you'd asked us at the start of 2020 what that year was, it was the Hertfordshire Year of Culture, all these different things going on. We had a really full programme of lovely activities and events and exhibitions that we were doing, and everything changed. So, last year, things that came out were, everything from a rainbow that's been painted by a child that was in a window, through to Black Lives Matter placards from a local very peaceful march in Watford. So things that you never imagine actually have resonance. And it's the same with football as well. There's items that you just never imagine really, or people who don't love the football or whatever, they wouldn't understand the connection with it, because something will resonate. There's a little pen, a little kind of plastic Bic style pen from a Watford Southampton match in 1980, and they're so rare and everyone loves them, and they are just literally a yellow pen with a little bit of text on it, and so cheap, but they really, they're like gold dust. If you can find one of those on eBay, you're winning. So I love that we don't know, and sometimes you see museums where they over predict things, and they'll be the judge as well. And we do have to judge. We do have a collections policy. We do have to limit what we can bring into the museum and be strict about it, because we haven't got limitless space. But at the same time, it's the community that defines what history is quite often, and what direction it goes in. And the town keeps changing. And it always has, really. I think it can feel turbulent, and I think that's one of the important things about a museum, is it gives you a sense of place when there's lots of building work and developments and things going on. But that's also the same story that people in Victoria and Watford would have felt, with the coming of the railways, and suddenly boom, everything growing really quickly. So it's not a new story in Watford. But helping people to find that connection. So I don't know. It's wonderful, isn't it? Because in 100 years' time, our mobile phones that seem up to date will be, even in about 5 years' time, that will happen. And things that people felt were ubiquitous and you'd never be without are now obsolete. And other things come back, like cameras, that look like were cameras dying a death, and now people have really gone back to mechanical things as well. So it all goes round in circles, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does.
How about you? What do you think is there anything that you think will?
I think we're probably going to be going more to a virtual kind of museum setup, because unfortunately there isn't a lot of support from districts or borough councils or whatever to really promote and invest in their local heritage and history. We're rare, of course, obviously Three Rivers went to a lot of time and effort to raise the money to build our hive. So we have that, but that was almost a 12, 13-year process. I don't see smaller places being able to do that. I think we're going to go more to the virtual thing. But I hope there is still a physical building to go to, people can go to, because seeing something in person, up close and personal, is different than just seeing it on a screen. Especially when it comes to, books, and if you can leaf through a book that was written in 1899, about anything, I think that's just absolutely fascinating. I think there's a textile kind of feeling when you're handling, or you're looking at a book that was handwritten 150 years ago. It's just amazing. So I think you have to see that. But I think you're going to find that, yes, there will be a section of a museum somewhere with a lot of 8-track cassettes and, the big original mobile phones that weighed about 25 kilos. You had to carry them with a sling on your shoulder. Yeah, we'll see a lot more of that kind of stuff. And then, 50, 100 years from now, people will be going to museums and just looking at these things in amazement, like you and I do when we go see something that's 100 years old back in Victorian England, or, even longer. And they'll be just amazed at rotary phones and 8-track players, and it'll be a big discussion, so yeah, I think we're gonna probably go that way. I just hope that local communities and district councils and local authorities just realize how important it is to invest in this, because they are investing in the past of their residents, and to ignore that or to not support it is really a shame. So I hope to see, a lot more, not just our area. I think you and I I think we're pretty lucky. We do have a lot of support from, our local authorities and everything, and they do recognize the history and heritage. But there are some areas where it just isn't happening, which is a shame. So, yeah. So we'll see what happens. What if if you could acquire, what one item or two items, what would you really like to find? What
Oh gosh.
if you could have one really special item in the museum, what would it be?
Oh my goodness.
Would it be archaeological? Would it be natural history? Something from a certain part of Watford that isn't represented in the museum?
Yeah. I mean, I think sometimes medieval history in Watford, Watford was a medieval market town, and it is difficult to sometimes tell that story because the objects, people didn't have a lot of objects. People couldn't afford,
Mm.
nowadays our houses are filled with stuff. And that was more of a Victorian thing as well, where people still had far less items than we had today. But, if you go back that far, there's little hints and stories. I mean, I love that with archaeology as well, that you get those one single object and it's what does it all mean and where does it all lead to. So medieval Watford you tend to see more in some of the buildings in the town, or it's part of to do with the geographical layout of things, like where the market was. So things like that are always wonderful. And actually old images, sometimes paintings that go back further than photography. So, but to be honest, we get this quite regularly where you'll get a photograph in and it'll be something you've just never seen before. We had some photos in recently, and a couple of them, one of them included when the market was in the high street, but it was from an angle that we'd never seen before. And another one was of the Lido, where they used to be swimming down in the River Colne. And again, it was just a different, I've seen a few pictures of that, but it was just taken from a different angle, and it just showed you exactly where it was, and you could see the arches. And so sometimes it's tiny things as well. But yeah, I mean, there's amazing people from Watford, like Anthony Joshua. Wouldn't it be amazing to have some of his history sort of in the museum? Because there's people that have got such a lovely local connection.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would like a Watford FA Cup in the musean. There you go.
There. Okay. All
So
right.
that's an ambitious one. So
Yeah.
Watford can bring us a cup for an FA Cup final and win it, and we can have that in the museum. Yeah, that's going to be my star object, because that will tick every box. And that's quite a big ambition, quite a lot to work towards. But yeah, that's it though. That what I love about working in a museum is that you get these tiny things and people are like, oh, I'm not sure if you'd want that, and they're just as important and just as much connection. So who knows what things would be. We would love more from different communities over the years, people that have settled in Watford, different sort of people from different backgrounds and part of the world. Sometimes they're not so represented in the museum. Women's history as well, because of course that wasn't so well recorded. And we've got some incredible women in Watford's history who've got up to all manner of things. And if you broaden that out, someone like Violet Cressy Marks, who lived over at what's now called Hunton Park, one of the world's most amazing female explorers, and a journalist, possibly a spy. She was in caves interviewing Chairman Mao, and up the Amazon, being bitten by snakes and things, and just thinking, wow, what an incredible person. And I think there's always more to uncover, but actually just someone who's lived in Watford their whole life, they're just as exciting to us. So yeah, I don't answer a question well, do I? I don't have a one definitive thing.
No, that's fine. No, that's why we do this. What does all this mean? All this history and heritage of Watford. I'm going to make the assumption you're a local Watford person, or
yeah, I
yeah,
am
okay.
actually. For me, that's special. It isn't always the way. Like Martin, you're the kind of exact opposite with that, but you're so local and you're so connected. So I don't think it matters where you're born or where you grew up or anything like that. It's your connection with somewhere. But for me, I have to say that if I'm talking to people and I can tell them, yes, I was born in Shrowdales, and my brother was born on the last day of the King Street maternity, and you've got those local links, then actually people do know that you've got that connection. And because I've got a season ticket at Watford Football Club, you know, I am very, very local with that. I have moved to other places. I actually lived in America for a year when I was very little, travelled places, studied in other places and lived in other places, but always sort of seemed to have been drawn back to Watford. So that, though, for me, you know, it's a dream, isn't it, to work in your local area and to have that connection and to people to support us to do it. That's a, you know, but I do think it's a real public servant job. You know, we're a servant for people. And for me, yeah, I love that. And also with the wider within the work of what Watford Council does. I mean, I've been so proud of my colleagues during lockdown. And the people are always doing amazing things. I was saying the things planning to do behind the scenes. But, you know, the work that my colleagues have done from everything from fundraising for local communities and, you know, and the work that the mayor has been leading on as well, you know, right the way through to volunteering to help in all manner of different places, and that community spirit is lovely. I love that.
Great. Wow. I can't ask for anything else, Sarah. So I really appreciate your time and everything. Thanks for stopping by. And hopefully we'll be able to do this again, and everybody will be able to make it back to the Watford Museum and see all the fantastic things about the history and heritage of Watford that they have on display there. So we will hopefully catch up soon.
Yeah, and thank you so much for your friendship. You know, you do an incredible job, and seeing the book, you know, knowing that that's out there, it's just amazing. And we met right at the beginning of your work, Martin, and feel this is the kind of thing that just makes me feel really emotional and really proud to be part of something, you know, to see people that achieve so much. And, you know, it's absolutely incredible. So thank you. Please keep up your amazing good work.
Thank you. I will, Sarah. You too. You keep up your work too. So.
Oh, take care. Lovely to speak to you.
All right. Don't hang up yet. Don't hang up yet.
Okay.
All right. I'm just gonna. Where am I here? I'm gonna stop.